In May 1961, a dark green and white single-seater rolled through Gasoline Alley, and the men who owned Indianapolis started laughing. It weighed 500 pounds less than their roadsters, gave away roughly 150 horsepower, and carried its engine behind the driver, which every Indy mechanic knew was the wrong end. They called it the funny little car. But the man strapped into it was Jack Brabham, twice Formula One world champion, and within 5 years the front-engined American roadster was all but extinct. This is how a 9th place finish killed an institution. Now, some of you have been waiting for this one. When I made my film about the Lotus 38 winning the 1965 race, the comments section was very clear that the story began 4 years earlier with Jack Brabham and a little car from Surbiton. You were right, so today we are counting down the 9 moments that took the rear-engined car from a joke in Gasoline Alley to the only kind of car left at the Speedway. Number 9. The garage that built its cars backwards. I always thought the right place to start this story is nowhere near Indiana. It is a modest garage on the Ewell Road in Surbiton on the edge of London just after the Second World War. Charles Cooper ran the workshop, his son John worked in it, and in 1946 the two of them built a tiny racer for the new 500 cubic centimetre class. They took the front ends of 2 old Fiat Topolinos, welded them together and bolted a chain-driven motorcycle engine in behind the driver's shoulders. There was no grand theory behind it. A drive chain only stretches so far, so the engine had to sit next to the wheels it was driving, and those were the rear wheels. Cooper was rear-engined by accident years before it was rear-engined by conviction. Those little Coopers dominated the 500 cubic centimetre class, and a whole generation of drivers came up through them, including a quiet, wiry Australian named Jack Brabham, who arrived in the mid-50s and never really left. The grandees of the sport sneered at the operation. Enzo Ferrari dismissed the British constructors as garagistes, garage men, tinkerers who bought their engines and assembled cars in sheds. He meant it as an insult. The Coopers treated it as a job description, and by the late 50s the garage men had noticed something the great factories had not. Put the engine behind the driver and the car becomes smaller, lighter and faster through the corners, even with less power. However, before that idea could cross the Atlantic, it had to conquer Formula One first. Number 8. 2 world titles nobody could argue with. In 1959, Jack Brabham took the rear-engined Cooper T54 to the Formula One World Championship, and he won it the hard way. At the season finale at Sebring in Florida, his car ran dry on the final lap, so Brabham climbed out and pushed it across the line in the Florida heat to finish 4th, and the title was his. A world championship, sealed at walking pace behind a car with its engine in the back. The following year he made the argument again, and this time there was no drama to hide behind. In the 1960 season, Brabham and the low-line Cooper T53 reeled off 5 Grand Prix wins in a row on the way to a second straight championship. And Cooper took the constructors' title both years. Ferrari, still loyal to the front-engined layout, was beaten so thoroughly that even Maranello gave in. And by 1961, every serious Formula One car on the grid carried its engine behind the driver. That mattered because of who was watching. Roger Ward, the 1959 Indianapolis 500 winner, had entered a midget car in the United States Grand Prix at Sebring that same weekend, and he got a close look at what the little British cars could do through a corner. Ward was an Indy man to his boots, yet he came away convinced the layout might work on the big oval back home. So he invited the garage men to come and have a go. Number 7. 2 quiet days that frightened the Speedway. In October 1960, fresh from a Formula Libre race at Watkins Glen, Brabham and John Cooper towed their Formula One car down to Indiana for a quiet test arranged with Roger Ward's help. Picture the mismatch. The Speedway, 2.5 miles of bricks and asphalt built for thundering roadsters, and parked on the apron a Cooper T54 Grand Prix car with a 2.5-litre Climax engine, narrow tyres, and gearing chosen for road circuits. It had little more than half the power of an Offenhauser, and it had never seen a banked oval in its life. Brabham went out anyway, built up speed across 2 days of running, and ended up circulating at over 144 miles an hour. Pole position for the 1960 Indianapolis 500, set by a purpose-built roadster with nearly twice the engine, had been around 146. The wrong car, on the wrong tyres, with the wrong gearbox, driven by a man who had never turned a wheel at Indianapolis, was within a couple of miles an hour of pole pace at the Speedway. Ward himself took the little car out for a few laps before it was packed up for home. The test was supposed to be a curiosity. Instead, it was a warning shot, and the handful of American observers who saw the timing sheets understood exactly what it meant. John Cooper went home to Surbiton to plan a proper entry for 1961. Number 6. Kleenex money and a stretched engine. A proper Indianapolis program cost far more than a garage in Surbiton could fund. John Cooper told Sports Illustrated that his shop was as modest as his manor and he could not possibly afford to enter the race on his own. The money came from Jim Kimberly, the Kleenex Air and Gentleman racer, and with his backing, Cooper built a one-off car for the Speedway, the Cooper T54. Coventry Climax stretched their 4-cylinder FPF engine to 2.7 litres, about as far as the old design would stretch, and it produced roughly 250 horsepower. The Offenhauser engines in the Roadsters displaced over 4 litres and made around 400. On paper, that is a massacre. But the T54 fought with different weapons. It weighed around 1,050 pounds, roughly 500 pounds lighter than a Roadster, and Cooper offset the suspension so the chassis sat over to the left for the endless left-hand turns. The wheelbase was shorter than the American rulebook wanted, and the technical committee waived the requirement, which tells you how seriously they took the threat. Fuel went in tanks along the driver's left side, a 3-speed box replaced the Formula One 5-speed, and the finished car, painted dark green with white stripes down the nose, looked like a toy next to the towering Offie Roadsters. That was the machine Cooper and Brabham shipped to Indiana in the spring of 1961, and the reception it got is where the title of this video comes from. Number 5. The month of May and the men who laughed. Gasoline Alley in May 1961 was a confident place. The Roadster was 30 years of American oval racing distilled into one shape, built by men like A.J. Watson, who had won everything there was to win. Then the Cooper was wheeled out low enough that a mechanic could see clean over the top of it, and the nickname started. The funny little car. Sports Illustrated, more polite, called it the British Bullet. Veteran crews wandered over to stare into the empty space where the engine was supposed to be, and the general view in the garages was that it was an amusing stunt that would melt away once the serious cars ran. The Speedway itself was not so sure. Early in the month, Chief Steward Harlan Fengler gave Brabham a stern dressing down for opening his rookie test at around 130 miles per hour when the schedule said 100. And when qualifying came, the joke stopped being funny. Brabham put the T54 into the field on the first weekend with a 4-lap average just over 145 miles per hour, lining up 13th on the 5th row in a 33-car field. pole went to Eddie Sachs at a shade over 147 miles per hour. Just over 2 miles per hour separated the fastest roadster in America from a stretched Grand Prix car with barely 6/10 of the engine. Number 4. 500 miles that changed everything. Race day, the 30th of May, 1961. Hundreds of thousands of spectators packed the Brickyard for the 50th anniversary running, and somewhere in the middle of the field sat the smallest car anyone had seen at Indianapolis in decades. When the green flag flew, the pattern showed itself immediately. Down the long straights, the roadsters simply drove away from Brabham, their big Offenhausers doing exactly what 400 horsepower does. Then the corners arrived and the Cooper came back at them, flat, composed, carrying speed through the turns that the heavy cars could not touch. Observers reckoned the T54 was quicker through the bends than any roadster on the track, and Brabham ran as high as 6th, spending long stretches of the afternoon inside the top 10. What blunted the challenge was rubber and pit work. The Dunlop tyres wore faster than the team had hoped, the stops were slow by Indianapolis standards, and a crew making its first start could not match men who had choreographed pit stops for decades. Even so, the little car ran the full 500 miles without missing a beat, all 200 laps, and came home 9th as A.J. Foyt took his first Indianapolis win after a duel with Eddie Sachs. 9th in a field of 33, giving away 150 horsepower with a rookie crew. The Speedway's own historians would later say that with decent stops, he could have finished several places higher. The crowd went home talking about Foyt. The engineers went home thinking about the Cooper. By the way, if you are enjoying this story, consider subscribing. I make films about British motorsport history every week, and I go through the comments on every video, which is exactly how this one got made. Now, back to the men who refused to laugh. Number 3. The Americans who took notes. The man who saw furthest past Brabham's 9th place was a tall Californian named Dan Gurney. Gurney had raced against the Coopers in Formula One, and he decided the rear-engine car was not a novelty, but the future arriving early. He invited Lotus founder Colin Chapman to see the Speedway with his own eyes, paying for the airfare out of his own pocket, then made the introductions at Ford that turned a hunch into a funded program, the alliance that would eventually finish what Cooper started. One driver, reading one small car's 9th place correctly, set all of that in motion. Remember his name, because the end of this story runs straight through him. The first American to act, though, was the hot rodder Mickey Thompson. For 1962, barely a year after the funny little car went home, Thompson built his own rear-engine Challenger around a lightweight engine borrowed from Buick, and Gurney qualified it in 8th place before the rear end gave out in the race. Think about that timeline for a moment. One 9th place finish by an underpowered British car, and within 12 months, an American constructor had already switched ends. The Roadster men told themselves it was all still a sideshow, and you can understand why, because a Roadster had just won again and the funny cars kept breaking. What they could not see was that the argument was already over. The corner speed was real, the math was real, and now Ford money and Lotus engineering were heading for the Brickyard at the same time. The invasion, Brabham started politely, was about to turn into a siege. Number 2. The avalanche gathers. In 1963, Colin Chapman arrived at Indianapolis with the Lotus 29, a rear-engine car carrying purpose-built Ford power with Jim Clark driving. Clark finished second, close behind Parnelli Jones in the Roadster Ole Calhoun, and the result came wrapped in controversy because Jones's car was visibly trailing oil in the closing laps, and many in the paddock felt it should have been black flagged, which would have handed the win to the rear-engined car 2 years early. I would bet plenty of you have heard old-timers argue about that afternoon to this day. The funny cars were no longer finishing 9th, they were finishing 2nd, on merit, with the fastest car on the track under them. The writing was no longer just on the wall, it was on the scoring pylon. Then came 1964, and if you want a single image for the end of an era, it is this one. Jay Foyt, the hardest charger of his generation, won the Indianapolis 500 in a front-engined Watson roadster, and it was the last 500 a roadster would ever win. Even Foyt could read the lap times, and by the following May, he had a rear-engined car of his own. That is the part of this story I find genuinely poignant. The roadster did not go out humiliated. It went out winning, in the hands of the best American driver of the age, and it still made no difference, because underneath the celebrations, every team owner in Gasoline Alley was quietly ordering a car with the engine behind the driver. 4 seasons after the garages laughed at the Cooper, almost nobody was laughing. Number 1, the extinction. May 1965 is when the revolution the Cooper started became total. Of the 33 cars that qualified for that year's Indianapolis 500, 27 were rear-engined, just 6 roadsters made the field, 4 with Offenhauser power and 2 with the Howling Novus, the last survivors of a species that had owned the Speedway for a generation. And out front, untouchable, ran Jim Clark in the green and yellow Lotus 38, the car born from the Ford Alliance Dan Gurney had set in motion. Clark ran the whole 500 miles on a single set of tyres, stopped only twice for fuel, and won by nearly 2 minutes, the first rear-engined winner of the Indianapolis 500. He did it 4 years almost to the day after Jack Brabham's 9th place, and the roadsters he lapped were not beaten machines so much as museum pieces that had not yet been told. A year later, in 1966, a single front-engined car made the show. 1. The species did not survive long after that. The last stand came from Jim Hurtubise, a roadster man to the end, who built his own front-engine car, the Mallard, and squeezed it into the 1968 field. It lasted 9 laps before the engine let go, and no front-engined roadster ever took the green flag at Indianapolis again. By 1972, when Hurtubise was still towing the Mallard to the Speedway, he famously lifted the hood during qualifying weekend to reveal cases of beer where the Offie should have been. The extinction was complete, and it traces back through Clark and Chapman and Gurney and Thompson to one afternoon in 1961, when a dark green car with its engine in the wrong end finished 9th and quietly ended a way of life. So the next time someone tells you revolutions start with a victory, remember the Cooper T54. It never won at Indianapolis. It never even led a lap there. It proved the idea in front of the one crowd that mattered, and then handed the sword to Lotus. The Cooper fired the first shot, and the green car with the yellow stripe delivered the final blow 4 years later, humiliating the field by nearly 2 minutes. I have told that whole story already, the film about the 1965 Lotus 38, and the day the laughing stopped for good, and if you want the ending to tonight's beginning, that is where to find it. If this one earned it, a subscription means a lot to a small channel like this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you at the next one.